Thinking of playing. This is the Civil War Brigade series. The game is Champion Hill. I am going to continue on using the tip given in the series rules for a beginner's note. So it says, set up a few units at random and run through the procedures and examples of different play actions. As questions arise, look up the answers in the rules. Try to imagine why a rule is the way it is by applying common sense and your knowledge of history. All rules have at least something in back of them, even if it is only to avoid conflict with other rules. So I'm going to start this, and I thought if possible, I'm going to kind of start with what I think of as the center and move out. So I'm going to go right to close combat, which is rule section 23. So in general, how is close combat handled in the CWB? Close combat is a combination of fire and movement, which occurs in the movement and close combat phase. Moving units which desire to conduct close combat move adjacent to their target, expend 1 MP plus the cost of the target's hex, enter the hex, and then resolve combat as listed below. We have a nice detailed step-by-step procedure. Let's see how clear it is. So here we have GIS Brigade, Walker's Division, Confederate in line. And here we have Holmes's Brigade, Crocker's Division, or 2nd Brigade, 7th Division, 17th Corps. I meant to say GIS Brigade, Walker's Division, if I didn't say that right. Both in line, and the Union, Holmes's Brigade, is going to be the attacker and move to conduct close combat against the Confederates there. Of note, he's Holmes's Brigade, for elevation purposes, he's going up across the same elevation, level 3, and then down elevation level 2, where the Confederates are in position. So even before we get to close combat, because Holmes's Brigade has to get there, how do we actually handle movement? What are our movement allowances? Assuming there are movement allowances. I can see from the train effects on movement chart printed on the side of the Champion Hill map, looks like terrain costs are per formation. So Holmes's Brigade is in line, and I'll see what I can figure out. Okay, so it does come down to the terrain effects on movement chart printed on the map. So this is particular for Champion Hill. I'm assuming Holmes's Brigade is in line. So according to the table, it tells me that its movement allowance is 6. So Union movement moves 1 hex, and this is upslope, up in elevation. Yes, up in elevation, so that's adding 1. So it's 1 for the clear, plus 1 for up in elevation, so 2, 3, and then it's going to be 4 plus 1 for the close combat, 5, from a total movement allowance of 6, but 1, are there extra movement costs for the enemy Zoc? And what does facing have to do with movement, if anything? Okay, so it appears that facing does not have a significant impact on movement, at least not for these purposes here, at least not for our purposes here. Yes, when Holmes enters the Confederate zone of control, it must stop movement unless its very next movement is the movement into the enemy hex for close combat, which is what we're going to do here. So it looks like Holmes had enough movement allowance to get there, and so movement wise, so elevation change was a factor. That was really and the second main factor is that while facing is not significant for movement per se, once Holmes gets here, it can only close combat to a frontal hex. But that's to be expected. Okay, so we got our boys in blue to the close combat hex. Okay, so for the close combat procedure, step A, the attacker enters the defender's hex, paying the hex's cost, plus 1 MP, which Holmes's brigade did. Go on to step B, first the defender, then the attacker. Conduct fire combat. Do this sequentially. Execute the results and make straggler checks as each is done. They make no morale checks now and ignore modifiers to be applied to the morale table from the fire table. Okay, that is step B. So fire combat is integral to close combat. So now we're going to go to fire combat and try to get try to execute GIST brigade fire combat first. Okay, before I get to the detailed walk through the detailed fire combat procedure, I'll talk about this first, and I'm just going to read the play tip that I'm going with, but let me explain that right there. So play tip, a way of making the combat resolution system much faster and easier is to roll all the needed dice at once and to read the results as needed. To do this, place the following combination of dice into a dice roller. 2 large red dice, 1 smaller red die, 1 yellow die, 1 black die with white dots, and 1 white die, black dots. The actual dice colors used is up to you, but okay. Using the above dice, they will be read as follows. The 2 large red dice are for the main combat table. Smaller red 1 rounds any 1/2 results. The yellow die is for the straggler table. The remaining 2 dice are for the morale table, with the black die being the 10s digit and the white die the 1s. So 65, for example. Use only the results from the dice which are needed according to the fire table results. In other words, if the fire table result has no effect, ignore all the other dice. Speeds up play. Okay, I don't always do these things, but especially when it comes to the gamer's game and a Dean Essig design, I'm apt to follow all types of play tips like this. So I am going to be using this procedure. So it's a fistful of dice used for reading all different steps of the combat. Now we can take a look at the detailed fire combat procedure. Step 1, total the fire points applied to the target using the small arms or artillery range tables to determine the total points firing. Plus weapons, use the fire points listed in parentheses. So what do we need to determine that for GIST Brigade? So to figure the fire points for GIST Brigade, we know it's close combat for the range, but we need to know what fire level we're talking about, and we need to know whether he's a plus weapons fire unit. All right, we'll assume completely fresh brigades here, no prior losses. So I'm looking on the Confederate loss chart, GIST Brigade, Walker's division. We know he's a C morale unit, and his fire level right now is AAB. So how do we translate that into the fire level ABC on the fire determination chart? Okay, not a plus weapons type unit, because I think there would be a large, very clearly marked plus on the upper left part of GIST counter. So not a plus weapon. So now we figure out, how do we translate AAB into the fire level for this fire combat? Okay, I'm actually not I'm not certain, but I am assuming GIST AAB fire level is treated as an A on the table. So an A in close combat, non-plus weapon is 8. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to use on the fire combat table, I'm going to use the 7-8 column, and I went through the Fire combat table modifiers is column shifts, and none of these actually apply. So I'm going to do I guess a straightforward fire no modifications on the 7-8 column. Okay, here's the roll. So I guess this is the table result. Very average 8. And 8 on the 7-8 column is 1 1/2 is the result. Okay, assuming the 6 is the 1/2 result, round up, round down determinator. This would be round up. So the 1 1/2 result, I guess, is a 2 result. So now we're at a 2 result. Okay, so the fire combat table notes indicate a number equals number of casualties, straggler check, and morale check. So if the final fire combat table result was 2, I'm assuming that Holmes, taking the Union loss chart, finding Holmes, Crocker's division, I'm assuming that we would mark off those first 2 boxes. Now I'm assuming that it is still a double A fire. I assume that he only drops to an AB fire after checking the first box of the AB series. I'll just assume that. But in any case, Holmes is firing back still as an A fire, I think. All right, so we have to check stragglers next, and the exact procedure is this. Choose the correct half of the straggler table to use based on the 1/2. Okay, we had 2 losses. So we saw it earlier. Where is it? Here it is. Straggler table. Fire loss 1/2 to 1 or 1 1/2 or more. So we're on this one. So now I guess we pick up our yellow die as a 1. Oh, so I guess it's the morale. Okay, so choose the correct table. We have that. Roll 1 die. We've already rolled it. So there are modifiers. Okay, die roll modifiers. +1 to die if unit is DG mounted or hit in the flank. No. +2 to die if unit is routed. No. From a wrecked brigade. No. Or fires at night. No. Fire result used. Fire result which determines table is before rounding. Oh, we still at 1 1/2. Okay, but still have to remember that before rounding. Fire result is also okay. Okay, so no modifiers. We rolled a 1, so we need to figure out what. Now, the assumption would be, right, that the target, Holmes is the target, and Holmes is a C morale unit. So I'm assuming a die roll of 1 with a C morale is a 1. But let's quick check. Okay, so I am going to just go ahead and assume here that going back to the Union loss chart, Holmes already lost 2 for casualties, and then I think we would mark off the next using a different symbol, like a single slash. We would mark the next box, and that would drop Holmes to an AB fire, which still for combat resolution, I'm assuming that's still for fire points determination, still just an A fire. But okay, I guess Holmes did drop to the next fire level category. All right, so we still have a morale check. Procedure is find the unit's morale level to the left of the morale's table. Again, we know Holmes is a C morale unit. We find the C row on the morale table. Then total all applicable modifiers. We do have down here on the morale table modifiers, we have a huge one, a close combat attacker. Yeah, Holmes is attacking, so it's a -6. -6 is down 6 rows on the column. So starting at the C row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're way down here. And then roll 2 die. Roll 2 dice and find the results. So we already have the die roll result. That's a 65. Come across to 65, and we have the worst possible result. So this was pretty devastating for Holmes's brigade. So routed back to straggle 3 and 2 asterisks is even units qualifying above must retreat. Okay. Okay. So routed back to straggle 3. So in general, Holmes's brigade is going to be marked with a routed marker. It's going to be forced back 2 hexes, and is going to have be marked with 3 more stragglers. And what's significant about that, I think, is how fast this is all adding up. So we were at the first. We had already marked off the first box in the AB section. We're marking off 3 more. That takes us to within 1 of hitting the check mark. So we might want to figure out what this is all about. Okay, while we went through that little procedure, which was good practice, actually when I got back to the close combat procedure, we actually weren't supposed to do this like this. For close combat, I guess what the procedure we were following was fire combat in general. Specifically for close combat, we are supposed to execute the results and make straggler checks, but no morale checks for now, and ignore modifier blah blah blah. Okay, so I guess we could take the losses and the stragglers, but not a morale check yet. So in this case, Holmes does get to return fire. So Holmes will return fire, and we'll just see how effective the attacker in this case is against the Confederate defenders there. So I think Holmes is an A fire too. Close combat, same fire points as the Confederates, 8. So far pretty symmetrical. Holmes's roll got some low values there. 6 for the fire table combat result. So 6 on the 7-8 column is 1. So just would take 1. And for stragglers, probably nothing. Fire loss is 1. His morale is A. Oh, whoops, he's C too. Oh, they're both C. Okay, so he's C. C morale, die roll of 1 is nothing. So no stragglers. Yeah, no stragglers. So now, I guess the rest of this won't apply. Now we can pick up the close combat procedure again. Now the attacker checks morale. The attacker checks morale at -6. Plus any other applicable, I don't think any other applicable modifiers. Yeah, so now it would be, well, 56 is pretty high too. So the attacker gets, Holmes again was on C row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 56. Just got into the disorganized back to straggle 1. So straggle 1 is not going to do anything major. Back to disorganized. We have a disorganized marker back 2. But now let's see how we... If the morale result forces the attacker to retreat, yeah, back 2 is a retreat, right? Yeah, back number equals retreat number of hexes. The attacking player executes the result and the close combat ends. Okay, so he would go back. Now I wonder, does he have to go back, recovering the hexes that he advanced through? Probably not, but... Okay, so no, does not have to retrace his steps. Has to retreat locally to the rear. So I guess he could go straight back, down in elevation and into the wood line there, which probably would be best. Okay, so if the attacker had not been driven back like that, then the defender would do a morale check at -4 plus other modifiers as apply. And then we have step E. If combat has not ended yet, use the odds table to determine the winner. The loser from the odds table retreats. Attacker 1 hex, defender 2 hexes. If the defender is the loser, he must conduct an additional morale check at the end of his 2 hex retreat. Okay, so you're using the close combat resolution and odds table. If, again, the fire hasn't determined the outcome, so you have an odds column. To compute the odds, I guess you're using the current unit strength and a point value. So in this case, it would be close to 1-to-1. 1d6 die roll. Result. So you have a bunch of D results. Defender wins. Attacker retreats 1 hex. Then we have 1/2 A. Roll again. 50-50. Okay, defender or attacker. And then A, attacker wins. Okay. Die roll modifiers. Defender is wrecked brigade. Defender is wrecked brigade of wrecked division. Attacker is wrecked brigade. Defender is ×2 in sunken road or trench. Okay. Yep, so that is step E of the close combat procedure. In all cases, one side or the other will end up alone in the hex. The attacker may continue movement. Oh wow. Any remaining movement points afterwards. Note that the retreats caused by close combat do not expend movement points or cause a unit to stop moving. Wow. After the combat has been resolved, participating units only on either side may freely change facing and stacking position. Note that when determining unit strength for the close combat odds table, low ammo, DG morale, and formation have no effect on unit strength. Do not roll on the odds table when the defending units are routed. Instead, the defending routed units automatically rout and then make an additional morale check. Okay. Okay, just before I leave close combat, I'll note one, there are a lot of little rules, details, and restrictions. However, it looks to me, so far at least, they all make a lot of sense. Like, attacking units may not be in any morale state other than bloodlust or normal. That makes sense because all we're saying is units that are shaken, disorganized, or routed cannot conduct close combat. Makes sense. And there are a lot more here. Yeah. And there are, I guess, clarifications that are appreciated from a gamer's perspective, like unit size greater than AA has no additional effect on the close combat odds table. And so one, yes, I can already see through this play example that there are a good number of little detailed rules to remember and apply. Again, they are also fairly, well, they are understandable. Okay, now here's the example. I was wondering about the Union's retreat here, and down here under the restrictions, this is handled. So this is what is nice about a rule set like this. In some cases, you're looking for a specification, a clarification, etc. And in many cases you will find them. So if the attacker must retreat out of a close combat hex that he lost, the first hex entered must be the one from which he entered the combat. So Holmes did do that. He retreated back to 3510, which was the hex that he entered the close combat from. The defender's retreat hex must be opposite the attacker's entry hex, or as close as possible given the presence of enemy units. So if Gist had to retreat, Gist would go this way because it's opposite from the hex that Holmes came from. At the end of his retreat, the attacker still has all the MPs it had remaining before the retreat, and may continue to move and conduct more close combats if it has sufficient movement points remaining. So in our case, Holmes is disorganized, but still has one, I believe, if I remember correctly, one movement point left over. He started here, 1, 2 for going up, 3, 4, 5 for entering close combat, retreated 2, still has one movement point remaining, but the brigade is disorganized. So in considering what Holmes's brigade can do with its one remaining movement point and disorganized state, I'll go to the morale state effects table, look under disorganized, fire 1/2, movement 1/2, and no close combat. So it would be done in this case. Okay, so I'll just finish off with that on the loss chart, what the check mark is, the significance of that. So in the rules you can read in detail marking losses and stragglers. Each brigade has a row of ovals or squares in a line on the loss chart. Mark each casualty with an X, each straggler with a slash. Keep the casualties to the left of the stragglers by pushing the stragglers to the right and completing the X for each new casualty. By doing so, you make straggler recovery much easier to control. Now, when all the brigade's spots to the left of the rect marker, so when Holmes has taken 7 losses, the brigade is wrecked. Yeah, casualties and stragglers. So losses total, casualties and stragglers. The brigade is wrecked. Mark a line through the brigade's identification on the loss chart for easy reference. So I assume they mean line through Holmes's name here. And an X in one of the division's spot. Oh, I think that's here. This is Crocker's division. And I think we're Xing out one of those boxes for a wrecked brigade. Apply any appropriate modifiers from that point on as long as the wrecked status lasts. When all the spots to the left of the wrecked line for the division are marked, the division is wrecked. Circle the division's identification on the chart and apply additional modifiers from that point. So you have a multi-step loss system here. You have losses, you have wrecked brigades, wrecked divisions, and all of the modifiers and penalties associated with those. And there is a separate but short chapter, Rules Chapter 22, Wrecked Brigades and Divisions. As a unit's losses, both combat and straggler, increase, the unit will reach or surpass its wrecked limit on the loss chart. Once all spaces to the left of the limit are filled, a unit is considered wrecked and all resultant penalties apply. A unit may become unwrecked. Here we go. This is what I was wondering, if stragglers are included in that wrecked determination and stragglers can be recovered, assuming, what does that do with wrecked status? So a unit may become unwrecked by the recovery of enough stragglers such that the unit's losses no longer reach its wrecked limit. Divisions, once enough of their brigades are wrecked, also become wrecked. Recovery of component brigades can lead to the unwrecking of divisions. Okay, so it's essentially reversible with respect to stragglers. A wrecked brigade or wrecked brigade of a wrecked division differs from regular units in that it has additional morale and straggler modifiers. Wrecked brigades may never attack in close combat. Wrecked divisions also affect core attack stoppage.